MG has been synonymous with sports cars, particularly diminutive ones, and we've got two fantastic examples here. The MG Midget, first introduced in 1961, and the MG TF of 2002.
Now the thing is, you might expect the younger member of the team, myself, to be going in a more modern car, the TF. After all, it is a modern classic, and these days they're a bit of a bargain, and I do like a bargain. You would expect the more mature member of the team to be in the simple classic, the Midget here. But to be honest with you, our opinions on which is best actually differ the other way round. So I'm going to take this beautiful example of a Mk3 Midget, Phil's taking that TF, and we're going to find out which is best.
The history of the British car industry is absolutely peppered with missed opportunities. What might have been, great ideas that are ultimately scuppered by a lack of budget, a lack of resource, or a lack of time, or possibly even all three. But sometimes a great idea materialises and it actually does come good despite all the disadvantages. The MGF of 95 is one such example. The MG badge had largely died when the Abingdon factory closed in 1980, but there was still an appetite for an MG sports car, and that flame reignited in 92 when the RV8 was unveiled. So then fast forward to 95 when the MGF comes out. It was a fantastic sports car developed on a fraction of the budget of what a normal car should be developed on. Two Metro subframes in effect stitched together. It had hydrogas suspension, giving it a nice compliant ride and excellent handling. A 1.8 K series engine bolted into the back, and hey presto, a fantastic miniature sports car for the modern age that really lived up to the MG badge. MG was back. Nearly 80,000 MGFs were sold between 1995 and 2002 when it was replaced by this, the MG TF. Now the TF of course evokes a badge originally used back in the 50s, but effectively it was just a heavily facelifted MGF. Peter Stevens was drafted in to give the styling a little bit of a makeover, sharper nose and a bit of a sharper back end, just to give it a more modern look. But the biggest change was that the hydrogas suspension was abandoned. After the Rover 100 was cancelled in 97, Dunlop, who made the spheres, just stopped production altogether. So that forced the TF to switch to regular coil springs. It doesn't make the TF a bad car to drive, it's still tremendous fun. The ride is definitely choppier, the handling is still exceptional. The steering is light but direct. The 5-speed gearbox has got a sort of short mechanical throw that feels quite sporty. It all works. It's great fun to drive. It just reminds me of MGs of old, be it the MGB or the MG Midget. And for that, I really like it. The sad thing was, of course, is that 3 years after it was introduced, MG Rover went bust and the factory gates at Longbridge closed for good. It did see a short reprieve because Shanghai Automotive Group, of course, bought MG Rover and shipped a lot of the body pressings over to China, where they resurrected production of the TF for a short while, and it was reintroduced in the UK as a knockdown kit between 2008 and 2010. The problem is that by then, the MG TF had really lost any competitive edge it might have had. It was quite a dated package when it came out as the MGF in 95. Don't forget, by the time the TF comes out of production in 2010, the Mazda MX-5 was on its 3rd generation car. But as a car that gives you smiles down a B road, great value for money, the MGF and the MG TF are really hard to beat. There's great club support and great part support, which means that maintaining one is actually really easy. And yes, of course, there's that issue of the head gasket failure that K-series are all notorious for. But again, you get an upgraded head gasket kit and it shouldn't trouble you. Keep it well maintained, replace that coolant. It's a great little car. As a modern classic, the MG TF really is hard to beat.
Believe it or not, the MG Midget was the flash option back in the day. Launched in 1961, the MG Midget was the posher twin sister to the Austin Healey Sprite, the successor to the Frog Eye Sprite, which had filled the gap in the market left when MG killed off their popular T-Type. After seeing that so many of their former customers were now buying Austin Healeys, MG struck up a deal with Austin for the Mk2 version, which would also be badged the MG Midget. The MG was £30 more expensive than the Austin, but apart from a different grille, a slightly nicer interior with some different dials, there really weren't a great deal more differences. But the whole point of the Midget is to keep it small, light and simple, and thus keep it cheap. It featured drum brakes all round, the heater was an optional extra, the windows were sliding pieces of perspex because that was cheaper than making glass that wound up and down, and there were no exterior door handles. Luxurious the Midget was not then. It was launched at a price of £679, and for context, the MGB that came out a year later started at £950. Half as much again. And those early Midgets were so popular that MG sold around 15,000 of them. So having established that there was very much still a market for a small MG, they set about refining and honing the Midget. In later life, the engine grew to 1098cc, winding windows were introduced, which made it that much more livable day to day. Semi-elliptic rear springs were introduced to smooth out the ride over rough surfaces, which was one complaint with early Midgets. And luxury of luxuries, exterior door handles were made standard. In 1966 came the Mk3 Midget, now powered by the 1275cc engine that we saw in the Mini Cooper S, albeit with a slightly detuned head to give 65 horsepower over the Mini's 76. And some purists complained about that and said, why should the sports car MG get less power than the Mini?
The answer was simple. With Cooper S power, the Midget would have been faster than the more expensive MGB.
And don't go thinking that by having the power detuned on purpose that you lose any sense of fun in a Midget, because this for me is still one of the most fun classic car experiences there is possible to get. The steering is lightning sharp. I'm not joking, I said that Caterham was flick of the wrist, but this is so dialed in, it's telepathically sharp.
But it doesn't feel nervous. Because the suspension is still on the softer side, there's enough lean for the Midget to feel eager and exciting, but not intimidating.
It's tiny and yet it feels perfectly formed. I've got everything in here I need for a great time. It's little and it's light and it proves just how little car you actually need to have fun.
You can't make cars like this anymore, and you couldn't by the 90s when the F and the TF were conceived. Make no mistake, the TF is a fine sports car, and it did a great job of keeping MG in the sports car game.
But the Midget for me is what a small sports car is all about. Minimal size, minimal weight, minimal complications, but with a massive smile on your face.
Ah. Well, that was a lot of fun, Joe.
It was indeed.
What are your thoughts?
This is every bit as fun as I remember it. A Midget is just one of the most enjoyable driving experiences, it just flat out ever, and this has just reminded me how much I love them. How about that?
I mean, they're great. We've had one before, and it's every bit as good as I remember that one to be, actually. And actually, what I'm really impressed with the TF is how authentic it feels. You know, it's got the same cheeky character as the Midget. The proportions, sort of agile charm about it, it's there in spades as it is with the Midget.
It's a worthy successor, there's no denying that. And the other thing to bear in mind is price. We were looking at around £5 because £5 will buy you the best of the best with a TF these days. A late one, mint condition, low mileage. £5 for a Midget might get you a good one, or it might get you a bit of a project. It certainly won't get you a mint one like this, but
that ultimately is what sways it with me. In terms of value at the moment, because the values of Midgets are going up, I think value, the TF just nicks it for me, and that's the one I would...
That's your vote. It's interesting because I'm heart and head, I like a bargain, like good value for money. The TF is great value at the moment, whereas these are very slowly getting expensive. But in this case, heart rules head, and this is what I prefer. This makes me smile more. But let us know which one you prefer. Comment below, Midget or TF, old or new. Which one does it for you?